Prey is a game that you need to play as blind as possible going in if you intend to have the best experience, and by watching this video, you will be depriving yourself of that experience. And so for as much as I want your view, I don't want to be the one to take the potential away from you. I will still be here when you finish this game. Arkane Studios' 2017 release Prey is a game with a lot going on. If I had to try and summarize it, I'd maybe tell you that it's an open-world, level-based, parkour action, survival horror, crafting stealth FPS game. That's kind of a mouthful though, so maybe I'd try to slim that one down and tell you that it's about trying to survive a takeover of a space station by a hostile alien threat. But that doesn't really get to the core of the game's identity either, so what I've settled on, in addition to both of those previous statements, is that Prey is the most moving exploration of what it means to be a human in the definitive sense that I've ever experienced. Exploration of the human condition and what humanity means aren't really new themes to my channel, but I think Prey latches onto these themes in a way that is different than I've ever experienced before, and to fully explain that, we have to start at the beginning. I think one of my favorite things a story can do is when it clearly lays out exactly what that story is going to be about right at the beginning, and Prey is a bit of a masterclass study in doing so. You awaken on March 15th of 2035 as Morgan Yu. Your brother Alex calls, welcoming you on board to the family company Transtar. There's a spot for you right at the top, and he says the two of you are going to shake things up, just like old times. You can explore your apartment to your heart's content, maybe check some emails. It's a fairly small living space despite its prestigious height over the rest of the city, and that city itself will have to be viewed through windows only. The door to your balcony is currently jammed, and it's not like you're just going to smash in a window to get a breath of that morning air. Besides, there's a helicopter waiting for you on the roof that'll take you to the Transtar headquarters here in town, leading to an incredible flyover of the city that instantly draws connections to the city flyover from Cyberpunk 2077's Corpo life path. But while Night City feels dark and imposing, the city from Prey feels warm and inviting. This is a place for people, and it's beautiful. The helicopter pilot will even call out how good the view over the bay is today, ensuring that you see both the waters and the studio behind the game. It would almost be gratuitous if Arkane wasn't welcoming you to a masterpiece. We land on the Transtar Tower to witness one of my favorite title card drops ever. Prey. The title slips away unnoticed as you disembark. Inside, you're welcomed by Alex, who gives you the basic rundown. Nothing fancy is happening today, just some basic onboarding, but Transtar is in the space business, and so you'll be in orbit soon, he promises. The tests begin simple enough, though perhaps a bit archaic. There are 3 boxes in this circle. How quickly can you remove the boxes from the circle? Don't think about it, just move, whatever feels right. You're in a room with just a single chair. You have 9 seconds to hide, and the testers will almost seem confused about you trying to hide behind the chair, which I can't help but feel is the only natural thing for a person to try. You're on one side of a room, and a small wall separates you from the other side, so get over that wall as fast as you can. Come on now, don't overthink it, just move. Something is clearly weird about these tests, though. Mostly because the testers seem a mix of disappointed with the results of your tests to outright confused by what they're seeing, despite there really only seeming to be a single way for a person to conduct these tests. They insist the problems are with the equipment, and that you, as Morgan, are doing fantastic, though. The final room contains a bit of a personality test, and here, the lead researcher, Sylvian Bellamy, asks if one of the others could go grab him a cup of coffee. The one he left on this desk is empty. At one point during the test, a new coffee cup appears on the desk, but Simmons never came back with a fresh one. Bellamy picks up the cup, and it kind of all goes downhill from there.
Security!
You awaken on March 15th of 2035 as Morgan Yu. Your brother Alex doesn't call you. You can explore your apartment to your heart's content, maybe check some email. Oh, it's probably nothing. It's probably some kind of system error. Wait, why is my computer showing a different time than my alarm clock? Hey, why is my apartment's planter bed a different color? It's supposed to be in black. You know, I think we're late for something. We should probably get oh. This can't be good. And right on cue, our phone rings. This call is not from Alex telling us that we're burning daylight again, but rather from someone named January. The observant will already know this name. January tells us that we're not safe, that we need to get out of our apartment, but there is a small problem. There's no way out. There's a wall where yesterday there was a path to the elevators and all of our neighbors' doors are locked. The only thing that's new from our last experience is this wrench, and even if you do pick it up, the game won't tell you anything to do with it. That's because the game expects you to figure this part out on your own, leading to one of the greatest reveals in modern game design history. This is the game telling you two core elements right off the jump. One, you need to be paying attention to this world. The game isn't going to give you a quest marker to break your window with the wrench, you have to put that together for yourself. But secondly, and more importantly, Prey has been lying to you, and it will continue to do so until the final seconds of the story. So, we're not in our apartment. And for what it's worth, we're not even on Earth. We're aboard the Transstar station Talos 1, high in orbit around the moon, and things aren't exactly going great. The problem of the hour is that a number of aliens aboard Talos 1, called Typhons, have breached containment. The smallest of these Typhons, called a Mimic, is what killed Bellamy, and the problem with Mimics is twofold. One, they're an ambush predator, able to mimic pretty much any physical object around their size, and secondly, they're able to split off by mitosis, with one mimic becoming 4 after feeding on a human corpse. On a contained space station, you can see how this might be a problem. But it's also a continuation of Prey's largest elements. You need to be paying attention to your surroundings, and that the game is going to lie to you. The mimics bundle both of those elements into a single aspect of gameplay. Here, this is an easy one. How many chairs are supposed to be inside this test chamber? Let's use this office as another one. We've just been shown that there are mimics in the area, and we've been shown that they can hide as physical objects. What doesn't belong? Why would there be 2 chairs for 1 desk in this office where every other desk only has 1? It's a short walk to the Talos main lobby, and my personal favorite of the game's many reveals. You know, I've played a lot of open world games, but if there's ever a world I'd want to actually be a part of, it would be Talos 1. You know, minus the aliens. The most important thing right now, so says January, is getting to our office. If you can pull yourself away from the view, that's the place to be. The office is a special place in Prey because it's your designated safe zone. It's the only place in the game where an enemy will never spawn, and it's Prey's take on one of the most important reoccurring themes in survival horror games, the save room. Now, I could go into heavy detail about why these rooms are so significant, but honestly, Jacob Geller already said it all better than I could 4 years ago.
Since the very first Resident Evil, these rooms kinda had a feeling like the eye of a hurricane. You aren't safe permanently. At some point soon, you're going to have to brave the outside again, full of undead and puzzles and not nearly enough shotgun ammo. But for a few precious seconds, you're safe.
The office in Prey lacks the same sensation of safety that the musical track Serenity brings to the Resident Evil 4 save room, but it carries with it comfort in a newer context. In a world filled with lies and an enemy intent on taking advantage of you not catching those lies, having one place in the entire game where you can be sure that there are no lies allows that final bit of tension to fall away. That tension falling away, of course, is also key to how tension in this game works. You see, I found that there's a sort of life cycle to anxiety and stress in Prey. If you never step into your office, you are always on guard, you are always tensed and ready to move, and once the game has built you up to your instinctually reactive state, you can sit there much, much longer than you might think you're able to. In this state, however, the game is no longer about fear or worry, but about cold calculation. It's bullets per bad guy, how many snacks I have left, how quickly can I clear any given room. But it's that build-up, that ramping towards the reactive state that always hit the hardest for me in Prey, and so by giving the player a place to relax, to let the player come down, it means that every time I stepped out of this office, all of that tension would build back again and the cycle would repeat. It's also important to note that your office is one of the few places in the entire game that houses both a recycler and a fabricator this close to each other. You see, as you prowl the world of Talos 1, you'll find all sorts of little things to fill your backpack with, from different guns to human bio-waste to toys and knickknacks, different foods and alcohols, and even plants grown in different garden areas. And every single item you can pick up in the game has a value attached to it, representing how much of what kind of material you will receive if you chuck that item into a recycler. You can then take that material and turn it into useful items at a fabricator, and by default, your options at the fabricator start out really limited, but as you explore more of the world, you'll find more and more technical specs for creating new items. This means that exploration is directly linked to improvement, and the office is the default place to benefit from that exploration. More than that though, Talos 1 is representative of my favorite style of world design. It's exactly the size it needs to be to represent what it's supposed to represent, and every section of Talos 1 feels exactly like what it's supposed to feel like. It's just a beautiful world designed with a sort of sci-fi Art Deco representation that feels so natural to the world of Talos 1 that it sometimes felt weird to remember that this wasn't a real place. You see, Talos 1 is not just a series of interconnected arenas to kill aliens in, it's an entire skyscraper built in orbit around the moon. Here in our world, the International Space Station is slated as the most likely candidate for the most expensive thing ever built, coming in at a staggering $150 billion, roughly 100 times more than the tallest building ever constructed, and the Talos 1 station represents a level of grandeur easily 100 times over that of the ISS, so it really shouldn't surprise anyone that it looks and feels like it costs that much. There are fine dining restaurants on board, bars with live music venues, recreation rooms, a pool, two movie theaters, and an entire arboretum at the top level. Talos 1 represents not just a science station, but one of the greatest achievements of human endeavor, and I am drawn and attached to it like I've never been with a game's world before, and as such, I spent so much time poking around every single area this station had to offer me. With this in mind, exploration of Talos 1 comes in more forms than just the world itself. Prey was made by Arkane Studios, the group behind Dishonored, a game that I've spent no small amount of time praising in more than one video, and with 5 years of extra experience in their style between Dishonored in 2012 and Prey in 2017, so much of what made Dishonored feel great, both from a mechanical and design standpoint, is polished to a mirror shine here in Prey. There are so many different ways to move around the world, both in the grand scheme, but also in the minor as well. Yes, you can traverse the station via the main lobby, or the elevator, or the external airlocks, or the guts, but you can traverse the individual floors and locales by parkouring around, by using Neuromods to increase your speed and jump height. You can use your suit's propulsion system to glide, making incredible leaps from dizzying heights. You can even use the glue gun to build yourself bridges and ramps to new locations, which, of course, the game will teach you is possible by having you observe the world around you. Honestly, we could probably just sit here and talk for like 10 minutes about how good the glue gun is, and how even after 15 hours, I don't think I even came close to reaching its full potential.
Ask yourself, am I holding my
glue gun
back from their true ambitions? The answer is always yes.
So many elements of this game encourage you to pay attention to even the smallest detail, and in doing so, I discovered the mystery of a hidden treasure connected to a tabletop role-playing game that was being played by a group on the station. Kind of. In truth, I wasn't actually smart enough to figure out the treasure map, which honestly tracks really well for a fully grown adult playing D&D. Friendly reminder to the DMs out there, the best way to stump your party is always a book of riddles for 5th graders. One treasure I did end up discovering, though, was the Captain's Special Golden Gun, and even if GoldenEye was a little bit before my time, I know a special item when I see one. This gun ended up being one of my most treasured possessions for my entire playthrough, and it felt like a thing worth exploring and following breadcrumbs for. And speaking of the glue gun from before, there's Gluey McGlueface, an adorable snowman who was made by comedic use of the glue gun and was decorated by the different shifts working in the department that made them. High up in the Arboretum, you can even find a small baseball pitch set up by one of the windows in one of the quieter, more reserved areas. Honestly, I think the most beautiful part of Talos 1 is that it so clearly looks and feels like a place that was designed for people to thrive. The culmination of all of this, the grandeur of the world design and the application of all the different tools, is when the game drops you into an honest-to-God bar fight shootout with aliens. At one point exploring the station, you'll come to a locked door, specifically locked down with a series of audio phrases spoken by one of the ship's technical admins, one Danielle Sho. You might not be able to locate Sho herself, but we can find all manner of different clips of her voice to build an audio profile from, and one of those clips is her singing in one of those previously stated live music venues where we can play a recording of her performance. The problem with this, of course, is that the Typhon are attracted to sound, so the 60 seconds or so that Danielle and her band are performing, the Typhon are going to be rushing your location. And so while the encounter might look and sound like this, taking a game more based in survival, horror, and stealth elements and suddenly dumping a high-octane shootout into it made those 40 or so seconds feel more like this. And honestly, it shouldn't surprise anybody that the music of Mick Gordon slips so effortlessly into the world of Prey because, you know, he did a lot of the music for this game too. Yeah, that's right, Mick Gordon, the guy behind Mastermind and Rip and Tear, is also the guy who wrote Alex's theme. I know video game scores have gotten better and better over the years, but Prey has one of the best in the business, and there are few musical themes and scores more capable of conveying a location's tone than Typhon Voices, with its deeply discordant piano notes and a deep but subtle constant bass beat behind it, like whatever monster that's hunting you might not know your exact location, but it's methodically ticking off its checklist of all of the places it now knows you're not. There's also the game's main opening theme, Everything Is Going to Be Okay, that plays while flying over the simulated city at the start of the game. It's a score that feels distinctly warm and calm and inviting, like it's sat on the precipice of some great new thing, but listening to it again, knowing the reveal that happens just minutes after, makes it all feel like another lie. I'll make a final note of the aforementioned song Alex's Theme, which is a song I would expect to see closing out a game during a bad ending. It's so utterly dripping with a melancholic loneliness, but learning that the piano and strings that define it were all made up by the same guy who figured out how to turn a chainsaw into an instrument gives the emotional weight of the song an entire layer of depth that it would otherwise lack. And while The Office does not have its own distinct musical theme, it does have this.
We've been testing a new kind of neuromod based on the Typhon organisms, mapping their neural patterns onto ours. Problem is, when you uninstall a neuromod, it resets your memory back to the moment you first put it in. That's why you forget. There's supposed to be a process to bring you back up to speed between test runs. But someone could just skip that part, turn a single day into your entire life.
I think it's fair to say that this memo from your past is probably the most important singular piece of information you pick up during your time exploring the station, but personally, I think my favorite bit of knowledge picked up from my time exploring the world is here on one of Morgan's personal computers, where you can read through some old emails, including one from a woman named Michaela Ilyushin, though she signs off her email to you as Mika. And suddenly, this isn't just about the world anymore. By the time Morgan becomes our surrogate for the world of Talos 1, he's had a bit of a run-in with some amnesia due to his work with Neuromods, a fundamental aspect of this game that we should finally talk about. If the concept of jamming a pair of needles directly into your eye makes your stomach feel uneasy, the time to look away is right now. In short, a neuromod is a copy of a particular part of a particular person's brain. Essentially, all of the complications of the human psyche can be simplified onto a map of neuron connections, and thanks to TranStar Incorporated, we can now make direct copies of those connections and plaster them into anyone else's brain. So when you use a neuromod to get better at shooting, you're actually remapping parts of your brain to have identical neuron connections to some famous, incredibly capable Olympic skeet shooter. Taking a neuromod out, however, is a little bit more complex. It can be done, but it doesn't just undo the neuron mapping the mod installed, it undoes all neuron connections made since it was first installed, essentially wiping the brain clean of all memories and resetting the brain to the moment before the mod was installed in the first place. This is, in short, what brought on Morgan's amnesia, and so when we see something like this email from Mika, which outlines her response to Morgan calling off some kind of relationship, seemingly in a pretty cold way with no explanation, it leaves us in a really peculiar place because neither Morgan the character or us the player knows what happened. The game presents itself on first playthrough in such a way that both the player and the character have the same amount of knowledge and information about themselves and the world they inhabit. It expands on this by leaving breadcrumbs throughout the world where characters will talk to or email each other about the events of their work and their lives, occasionally including information on the things Morgan has done or said in relation to them, always leaving me with this sensation of what I imagine blacking out while drinking feels like. People will tell you things you did or things you said, and you'll have no memory of those events at all, and you have no reason to disbelieve them, but it's also so hard to associate the Morgan you in these emails that I'm reading with a person named Morgan you that I am. It essentially feels like I'm trying to fill in the blanks and put together the puzzle of what it means to be myself as a person, who Morgan you was before we forgot it all, and what it means to, essentially, rebuild a personality from the ground up with just the scraps of who we were before, and to decide if we even want to be that person again. What this leaves you with is a world that you get to explore, and all the while in doing so, you get to learn who Morgan was and also decide if that's who Morgan still wants to be, all from the different interpretations of who other people thought you were. More than other people in general, however, there is January and Alex in specific. January is the first of the two that you'll meet, at least once the veil has fallen and we establish our place on Talos 1. In the simplest way possible to explain, Morgan made the call to start some perhaps not quite ethical testing of neuromods. Because of the potentially unethical but also highly secretive aspect of these experiments, he made the call to do the tests on himself, but one thing has led to another, and for definitely unethical reasons, Morgan has essentially been locked in a Groundhog Day-style testing pattern for a while. As a result of all the testing, Morgan has basically forgotten everything, which is a problem and a possibility that they seem to have accounted for, because January is essentially a robot companion running on a copy of Morgan's personality from before the test began, designed to keep the player on a set objective. January will tell you that the Morgan that you used to be laid out very specific ground rules for what to do if the Typhon ever broke containment, which they have, which involved making secret copies of the arming keys for Talos 1's self-destruct procedures and blowing the entire station to keep the Typhon threat from ever reaching Earth. Alex, to perhaps no surprise, wants something different. Neuromods are kind of a complicated thing, but they represent one of the greatest bits of potential that humans would have ever unlocked. Blowing Talos 1 would lead to undeniably the greatest loss that the human race has ever experienced in regards to information and the possibility of improved quality of life for everyone, so Alex's call is to stop us from blowing the station at nearly any cost. Adding to your pool of potential paths, you'll also be contacted by December, a robot operator like January who claims to be another instance of a previous version of yourself. December has a third plan, and they insist that their function is to ensure that you flee the station as soon as possible. December says that your only concern should be getting back to Earth and warning the planet about what has been done to Talos 1. December won't be around for long, though. One of the things that's easy to miss, I think, in this series of personal vibe checks the game sends your way by presenting you with all of these wants and desires of your family and the different versions of your past self is, what is your current self? Who is Morgan you right now? The main way that the game lets you decide this is via the application of Neuromods, and using mine, I spent a lot of time exploring the world of Talos 1 and achieving no small amount of secondary objectives and missions, both for myself and for other survivors aboard the station, some of which we will talk about later. In all of my time spent exploring the Talos 1 station, my Morgan ended up leaning really heavily into what was essentially a bit of a gunslinger, a build that would let me chase the vibe and pacing of that bar fight shootout. My personal application of the neuromods I collected and crafted led me to spec into firearm damage and increased recycling efficiency, so every trip back to the office I would delight in filling my pockets with as many 9mm rounds and shotgun shells as I could make. You see, I sort of had an idea that I could be this, space cowboy, that I could smoke a used cigar before each room and clear out every bad guy with a fast draw and a steady hand. This particular Morgan approached the world of Talos 1 as if it was a place for us to clear and make safe again, and it almost worked. The problem, you see, was that I'd put all of my efforts into turning myself into the protagonist of an old Aliens movie. The reality, of course, is that I was actually inside of a game called Prey. I was not the hunter here, and as I moved further and further into the game, I found that I was now being punished for thinking that I could be. And what this meant for me was a rapid change-up in the late game, both in the neuromods I valued and the way that I approached the game. Enemies in Prey will respawn or re-inhabit previously cleared locales, but loot will not, meaning that no matter what I do here, I will run out of ammo. Not just in the personal sense, but in the grand scheme. Eventually, there will just be no more junk to recycle into new bullets, and so my individual bullets I already had became precious to me. Each shotgun shell was called by name, and I spent them all only in the most desperate positions. I put my later points into speed and stealth, and soon the idea of gunslinging became this foregone notion, entirely replaced by the utter delight in realizing that, this game was made by the studio behind Dishonored, so of course it feels great to zip and slide and sprint throughout the world. I mean, you can even sprint backwards. I literally don't know if I can name one other game that allows me to sprint backwards. There is more to neuromods, however, than just letting you double jump or shoot better. You see, neuromods require recycled Typhon exotic material to be crafted. That's why the Typhon were being kept on Talos 1 in the first place. The problem is that Typhon mimics reproduce after killing and consuming humans. The volunteer department on Talos 1 is not actually staffed by volunteers. Rather, what Talos and TranStar label as volunteers are actually prisoners of different Siberian labor camps, and they have been purchased from those camps by TranStar for the exclusive purpose of being fed to mimics to increase the amount of exotic material that can be produced on the station. The game also heavily implies that these prisoners are a bit of a mixed bag in terms of their imprisonment and sale. Siberian labor camps are definitely where terrible people go, but those camps are also a good place to make people disappear in general, regardless of their guilt or actions. Neuromod creation is essentially a process by which a government gets to dispose of undesirables and a company gets to profit off that disposal. By the time I learned this, I had already jammed dozens of needles into my eye, and if we're being totally honest, that knowledge didn't really slow me down. The Typhon takeover felt a little bit like a whatever-it-takes kind of scenario, so I jammed as many mods as I could, with the exception of the Typhon skill mod specifically. By the time I got access to those, I was already moving for that gunslinger identity, so I never had a personal incentive to pursue those mods. Of course, Neuromods are not the only thing that the game gives you to decide who Morgan is right now, which is good, because for all of my interest in deciding who Morgan is mechanically, the game also reminds us that Morgan is human, and being human is another one of the game's great interests.
People are quick to project human features onto things they don't understand. The Typhon kill us without hesitation, but it's not because they're evil, it's because they can't do otherwise. You know what we discovered? They lack mirror neurons. For all their wonderful abilities, there's one thing we can do that they can't. Empathize with the suffering of another living creature.
One of the grandest themes explored in Prey is the notion of empathy, its inherent link to humanity, and that empathy is the one thing that the Typhons lack. This inability to empathize means that the Typhon do not hunt us because they are villainous, or because they intend to act maliciously, but rather, they're simply a force of nature. In the most general sense, the Typhon are incapable of understanding the emotions of others, or that others even have emotions because they lack them themselves and therefore cannot comprehend them. This notion will either be contrasted or complemented at certain points in the game, where the game will ask for your involvement not just in fighting aliens and repairing elements of a space station, but in your interactions with other humans. For me, this began at the end of a journey through the Guts tunnel system when I heard a call over the station's main sound system.
This is Chief Engineer Illusion. The power plant has been compromised. I repeat, the power plant has been compromised.
The name Michaela Ilyushin won't mean anything to some players. The entire emotional weight of this call depends on the player seeing this email from her in Morgan's office, but honestly, the notion that there are still human survivors aboard the Talos is reason enough to be invested. That said, this is going to be one of those places where you get to decide who Morgan is right now, and as someone who did see Mika's email, there is a bit more of a genuine pull here. Mika tells Sarah Elazar exactly where she's going to be, but neither myself or Morgan knows where the coolant station is right now, so it just came down to trusting that the game would eventually help direct me there. Later on in the game, you will be introduced to two other characters, one being Dr. Dio Igwe, and the other being the Chief of Security, Sarah Elazar, in nearly the same moment. Both are stuck in a bit of a holding pattern at the time you find them. Safe, but not for long. Igwe trapped himself in a cargo container to avoid the Typhon, but an explosion has rocked that area of the station, and now the container he's in has been jettisoned. He's only got a few minutes of air left, and in a complimentary sort of call, this is when Sarah Elazar reaches out to you as well. She's happy to see you around, but calls out that the airlock to her area has been lost due to the same explosion that sent Igwe's container loose. That said, you might be able to recreate an airlock of sorts by reattaching a container to one of the mounts still active in the cargo hold. So you can put all this information together, use the terminal to send Igwe's container home, open the container to free him, and you've created a way for yourself into the cargo area. What's interesting about Igwe's problem is that even if you're not being malicious, it's actually incredibly easy to kill him here. When using this terminal, you have the option to retract the container or open the container regardless of its positioning, and a simple misclick could send Igwe into the vacuum with no suit. This means you have to at least put some thought into his saving, an action that will cost you nothing but your attention. Saving Elazar and her crew, however, will cost you a little bit more. Elazar and her group are locked down tight, but stuck between two rooms full of Typhon. They need access to Cargo Bay B in order to keep moving, as does Morgan, but that area is swarmed right now, and Elazar requests that you help them prep to open the doors by acquiring a number of automated turrets to assist in holding the line once the doors are open. I think I probably did this part incorrectly because I ended up spending so much time on this one, between going to find the fabrication plans for the turrets and later realizing that there were already turrets scattered around Cargo Bay A and that all I had to do was find a way to transport those into the midway point where Elazar and her people were. This is not a difficult task on paper, but I was having one of those days where instead of a brain I had a dark orb, and it genuinely took me probably 45 minutes to go from entering Cargo Bay A and gaining access to Cargo Bay B, even though I think it was supposed to take like 5. Getting the door open though, and engaging in a multi-person automated turret-assisted firing line is another one of those moments. At this stage in the game, the Talos 1 station is going into pretty heavy lockdown. Some of it is automated, some of it is Alex trying to slow us down, but either way, it's all getting in our way. Thankfully, Elazar knows someone who has an idea on how we could bypass the lockdown elements, so she sends us on our way towards one Michaela Ilyushin. Mika has, up to this point, been unaware of Morgan's presence here on Talos, and the knowledge that they're on the station with her is met with the sort of tone that says this is awkward, but not nearly as much as everything else going on right now. I also really like that Elazar calls out for Mika to not shoot you on accident as you come in, or on purpose, which might not make a lot of sense if you didn't read this early email, but if you did, it's suddenly really easy to imagine a world where Mika and Elazar are good friends, with Elazar being Mika's main support system, being the person bearing the emotional weight of an old Morgan's cold decision to break things off. One of the first things Michaela will mention upon meeting her for the first time is that you were right. You, in this context, being someone you don't remember being. Back before Morgan and her were distant, Mika was warned that coming aboard Talos with her condition, a fictional neurological disorder called paraplexis, was a bad idea. It's actually sort of difficult to pin down what paraplexis is. It's made up entirely for the game and largely used as a device for NPCs rather than the player, but going too long without medication for it seems to slowly shut down the body. By the time we get to her, Mika is suffering from spotty vision, difficulty breathing, and a functional inability to move as her legs have gone non-responsive. But as the station's chief system engineer, she has an idea for how to bypass the station's lockdown protocols and systems.
There's a panel for shutting down everything. The whole station. The computer will scream at you, but just do it. Then pray it all comes back when you cycle the power. It should. It will.
Have you tried turning the entire space station off and then back on again? While the game will give you a main mission objective to go cycle the station, January will give it to you in plain words. The Morgan you used to be, the Morgan he is a copy of, knew about Mika's condition, and you helped her hide it so that she could continue her work on Talos. She doesn't have long at this point. At the rate she's going, her lungs will give out soon, meaning that even if the Typhon don't get her, her condition will. So, in simple terms, you now also have a side quest to go back to her quarters, collect her boosters, and return to her. You have 2 hours before she suffocates under the weight of her own body, but even with loading screens, taking a break to pocket some 9mm, and fucking up a few times, it barely took me 15 minutes. If you get her meds, she even has a line about how frustrating it can be around you. Morgan never did really listen to her, she says. She is, of course, still grateful that you saved her, and as she takes some time to recover, January will mention that perhaps the neuromod extraction process didn't erase all of your memories. Perhaps it left some kind of deep instinctual emotion behind. Or maybe you're just a better person than the Morgan uploaded to January's software was. We're closing in on the end of the game at this point, entering into the third act. With the station systems reset, Alex finally concedes that he cannot stop Morgan. Rather, the best he can do is try to explain, and so if you make the trip to his office, he will show you another video. One shot during the Neuromod testing that you'd been locked down in prior to the start of the game.
We did it, Alex. It's real.
Enjoy it while you can, because in a few minutes, it'll all be gone when we strip out the Neuromods and reset.
I know, including my memory of it.
No way around it. Let's talk about the backup.
So, the Typhon organisms have been producing an elaborate structure. Material is unknown, purpose unknown. Now my gut tells me it's a kind of neural framework, but externalized. Still waiting on analysis to confirm. In the meantime, I've given Alex the design for a device I think could shut it down if it ever broke containment. Alex just has to grow a pair and commit.
You don't have to take all the credit. What if it doesn't work?
It'll work. Trust me. What else are we gonna do? Blow everything up? That won't save us.
Alex wants to save everything. January wants to blow it all up. December wanted you to flee and warn Earth of what's going on. All three want something different because at different times, it's what you wanted. At least it's what someone that used to be you wanted. You are about to lose control of the situation, though. As it turns out, a $1.5 trillion lunar space station can only go dark for so long before the board of directors for the company that owns that space station starts to get suspicious. And when your parents, the public face of the board of directors, catch wind of the Typhon outbreak, they have their own want. Kill everyone. To do so, they've sent one Walther Dahl to secure all relevant information and eliminate any remaining human survivors. Yes, this is a bit of a drag, as mom and dad have decided that they value company profits over the lives of their children, a call that I would argue should let us add cyberpunk dystopia to my overly wordy genre breakdown of Prey from the start of the video, but it also comes with a bit of a silver lining. You see, Dahl arose on Talos 1 with a multi-person shuttle. This means that he is capable of flying a multi-person shuttle. This also means that the number of multi-person shuttles, as well as the number of multi-person shuttle-capable pilots aboard the Talos 1 station, has just risen from 0 to 1. That pilot is here to kill you, so it's going to be a difficult operation to sway his mind, but if Igwe happens to be alive, he will have a plan. Incapacitate Dahl, strip his mods and wipe his memory of his orders, and use his ability to fly a shuttle to flee the station via his shuttle with any remaining survivors. Which, after securing both copies of the arming key needed to activate the self-destruct sequence for Talos 1, is what I did. The Typhon threat was eliminated, Morgan was free to make their own choices, and we were able to escape with some friends in tow. That's not where this ends, though. You haven't forgotten, have you, that the game has been lying to you? Because it has been. Every second and every step has been a lie. You are not Morgan. At least, not yet. The final bit of Prey is you being pulled from a simulation. The entirety of your time on Talos 1 has been an illusion. You see, Morgan was on Talos 1, but Talos 1 was lost, and so was the Earth. Now, humanity is on the brink of extinction. What you've experienced was a simulation based on the memories of Morgan from his time on the station. And after completing a series of tests, you're to be evaluated by Alex and a team of operators. Operators made up of the personalities of Mika, Igwe, Elazar, and Danielle Sho. Together, these 5 will judge you based on the empathy of your playthrough. A significant metric, as you are not a human, you are a Typhon. Igwe commented that the Typhon saved it from the cargo container, and that I had also recovered a Neuromod component called a Connectome for a person called Letner. A thing of no practical use at this stage other than the sentimental value to Igwe. Igwe also acknowledged that the Typhon never installed a neuromod based on the abilities of its own kind, and that it even refrained from killing Dahl, allowing others to escape the station as well. Mika referred to the Typhon's willingness to return to her quarters and retrieve her medication, and also speaks towards the action of the Typhon in regards to Aaron Ingram, a neuromod volunteer that the Typhon made the call to save the life of, believing his recorded criminal history to be largely falsified. Elazar commended the Typhon not just for its bravery and actions in aiding the defense of her crew, or its initiative in destroying other Typhons all across the station, but also for preventing Dahl from using her crew as hostages. And finally, Danielle spoke. Upon completing Prey, I was given 2 Steam achievements. One for completing the game in the most ethical way possible, which was flattering, but then another for completing Prey without ever killing a single human, except I had. The story Danielle told was that of V-37, a volunteer aboard Talos. Now, while I might have given the impression that some volunteers' records were mostly to entirely falsified, like in the case of Aaron, not all people that TranStar bought from Siberian labor camps are the same. V-37 was a murderer, before his time on Talos and during. His actions were methodical, deliberate, and without considerations for the feelings of others. Without empathy. And Danielle tasked the Typhon during the Talos 1 simulation with killing V-37. At the end of that particular quest chain, you can find him here, restrained within a pod that failed to eject. And what I find so fascinating about that is how it lets the game tell you in no uncertain terms that a thing that kills without feeling for its own purpose and enjoyment, a thing that has no regard for human life, cannot in and of itself be human. Because when I executed V-37, I was still given an achievement for never killing a human aboard Talos. Because 37 gave up his empathy, his humanity, when he killed all of those people. And because he gave up his humanity, the game is laying it on pretty heavy that it no longer considers him to be a human in the same way that Igwe or Mika or Morgan was. Here at the end of all things, Earth is lost. The final hope, Alex says, is that they can put something of humanity into you. Years of research and development were spent to put elements of the Typhon into the human mind, but never once did they try it in reverse. Not until right now with you, with the desperate hope that you can somehow be a bridge between these two species. And so, at the end of all things, you are given a single choice. You can reject your empathy and kill them all, or take Alex's hand. And if you do take his hand, if you make the call to empathize, to view another as an equal, even though they're different from you, to thusly find your humanity, You can watch as your own Typhon hand becomes akin to human flesh and blood. A Typhon that can empathize. That's a human. That's Morgan. You know, it's kind of been a minute since we sat down to chat post-video. I hope you're doing well. I kind of expected Prey to be this quick 20-minute video on a handful of cool things that the game did, but instead what I got was a 40-minute video in which I feel like I barely got to talk about the game at all. So, I'm going to be releasing a companion video over on my Patreon page where I'm just going to keep talking about the game. If listening to me ramble about Prey for even longer sounds like fun, maybe consider making the jump and seeing if there's a tier for you. Patrons also get access to all of my work early, they get it ad-free, and they get credit for their backing in all of my videos. If that's a thing that sounds good to you, or if you just want to help support me and my work, that's the place to be. Thank you.